Welcome everyone to another exciting AWA Agora show. This is our 6th episode of season 4, and we are honored to have had over 40 amazing guests on the show over the seasons. And I know today's guest will only add to that fantastic list. For those of you that are new to the show, AWA Agora is an online talk show with the noble intent of facilitating thought leadership through discussions and conversations with pioneers and leaders in the fields of design, research, technology, and the art world. Our guest today is Laura Morris, and she is here to talk about designers as stewards for public health. Laura is an expert in healthcare interior design, recently returned to Perkins & Will to help lead the continued growth of their New York studios healthcare practice as it expands into other areas of the US and beyond. As we asked her here today to share her thoughts on the convergence between practice areas and architecture and how all can benefit from lessons learned from healthcare design. We will also discuss the vital role of the healthcare workers' own experience in design as we relook at how we design for the healthcare workforce. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
I'm glad to have you here today. I know that everything is now a little bit of a transition with more being in the office and more meetings maybe happening. So I'm glad you can take the time today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to talk today with all of you.
Great. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what brought you here to architecture in this talk that you want to give us today?
Sure, thanks. Again, I'm Laura Morris, and I am the healthcare practice leader at Perkins & Will, New York. I started my career, I'm actually born and raised in Texas, and I decided to go into interior design and architecture really because I found a passion around building and understanding, how we create space and how that affects our well-being and how it affects how we live and work. And I quickly found as I was working on, my undergrad degree that the things I enjoyed the most about it were really about how it could change how we experience life, experience the things around us. And that clearly that can be from any type of project, but I was really drawn to healthcare. So when I graduated, I got a job mainly working in medical planning, actually. And so that was my first, foray into design and working in the architecture world. I loved that, and I felt like it gave me a good base for understanding health design. And then from there in my career, I found my way up the East Coast, and I've been here for over 20 years. I have worked 100% of my career in healthcare in several different areas, but always looking for ways to improve the way we heal, the way we interact with our spaces. I've had some very personal experiences with family members spending a lot of time in health facilities. And I think that only made me more resolved in creating these spaces that really can transition us in different parts of our lives. It can be some of our happiest moments, from giving birth to a child to some of our saddest moments when we have to say goodbye to a loved one. And I think those poignant times really are what have driven me to really holistically throw myself into this as a profession.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's not your, the layman on the street might think, like hospital design, it's not that kind of emotional place. It's, clinical. It's, but it is very much a space that defines people's lives in many ways, either the people that work there or the people that have to be patients there, or the people that have to visit patients there. It's definitely a space that is very transformational. Never thought of it that way. It's interesting.
Today, I mainly want to talk about how I believe we are stewards of public health and how that's really been evolving and changing. I believe, and I'm going to talk through kind of these points that I have here on the slide, really how I, looking at it from a perspective of well and living design, and how, clearly being a more sustainable project of any type is going to really affect our public health and moving forward. What I'm seeing is more of the convergence between the different markets that are out there, that it's not purely just healthcare anymore, that there's really a blending that's happening. I want to talk a little bit about behavioral health because I think it's affecting all of us. And if it hasn't touched us personally, it's probably affected people that we love and care for. How I think we're going to be closing the gap on a lot of disparity in healthcare, whether it be access, whether it be really understanding disease and how it affects certain communities more than others. And then looking at how really this pandemic has done one thing, which is allow us to have a little bit more access and healthcare on the go. So that's what I'm going to talk through today. So around living design, Perkins and Will as a whole as a firm clearly has been at the forefront of really looking at how to build buildings of any type and make them more sustainable. And it's not just a LEED checklist anymore. It's really about resilience, about understanding how we can withstand the changing environment. Clearly, you know, in New York City, having to deal with hurricanes and things that we've had to deal with over the years that didn't used to be the norm, and now it is. And in the West, the fires. So I think, you know, it's really a holistic design, really understanding from a project type and typology, how we can be good stewards to the overall environment, the resiliency of a building, and also providing spaces that people can really thrive. So it's really looking at it in a more holistic way. And I think that's the first imminent way that we can be stewards of public health. And really looking at this, you know, like I said, from a different perspective, it's in our schools, it's where we work, it may be a healthcare facility, it may be our home, it may be where we go and play. Really looking at all those different types of space and really understanding how they all affect our life, you know. I think all of us during the pandemic, the things that we couldn't go to anymore, whether it be the gym or our yoga studio or even our library to check out a book. I mean, it affected us all in different ways, the normal things that we, you know, did. And I think now we need to look at how do we create those more accessible? How do we make those so they're more resilient to the changing times, so that we don't have to be deprived of some of those things that we love to do. So the convergence of projects. So typical healthcare space, this is probably similar to what comes to mind when you think of a hospital, a long corridor, clinicians in the corridor, you know, nurse stations, equipment. We've come a long way with making these spaces much more, you know, not seeing everything out on display, the technology being a little bit more integrated, not being as scary, maybe. I do think it's interesting that technology is evolving from the standpoint that we used to try to hide it all away. And now people are so much more comfortable with technology that you actually kind of want to see some of that on display. So that balance. But the hospitality nature that has really merged and become part of healthcare. But I think we can even go further. So yes, we can create rooftop gardens and we can have views and we can look at these spaces and our clinicians can have places to go for respite. But can we go even further? Like, where are we going to go with being able to really allow patients to even go outside more often? Do we create more access for our family and for our loved ones when they're bedridden? Can they actually go out and get some fresh air? I think these are all things that are going to be really coming to the forefront as we move forward in design. And biophilic elements, you know, biophilia design has been a topic that we've all been discussing for the last few years, and how we're bringing nature in and how nature innate design abilities can help inform how we create spaces and patterns and color and light. And I think that will only continue, and it'll be beyond the leaf pattern on a glass wall. It really will be how we maybe have dappled light changing throughout the day, the colors changing throughout the day, how we interact with our spaces to really help support circadian rhythm. And I think that'll become very important with our staff as well. And how can we learn from the different markets? So we're seeing a lot more projects that really are convergent from the standpoint of It may be a healthcare client, but they're building workplace space. It may be a healthcare client, but they're building new labs along with clinics, and they're really starting to look at how we can inform and understand the things that have been going really right in corporate or in workplace design or in higher ed, and how can we learn across those different markets and really help inform the projects that seem to be happening more multi-use across the markets. And we're always looking towards, and I think, the residential influence that has started to happen in all markets, how we can really start to look at that level of comfort and hospitality. We've all enjoyed and had, this great experience of being at home, maybe more than we've ever been in our lives. And how now, when we go back to work, is that really going to change some of our expectations? Do I have a comfy chair to go sit in and be quiet and look out a window for 20 minutes? Because it really helped my well-being when I was doing that from home. I think we're going to have to look at and respect and understand how that affects all of our workplaces. So behavioral health for all, I think the most interesting thing in statistics that I've seen around telemedicine, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in depth in a moment, but is how during the pandemic, behavioral health became more accessible to many different sectors, but most interestingly to adolescents and younger adults. How are we going to take those lessons and the access that we gave and to really understanding and destigmatizing some of the behavioral health aspects and access to therapy, to talking to someone as we move forward? How are we going to create those supportive environments, not only in healthcare spaces, but also where we work and where we play? These are younger, environments for younger children, but sensory treatments that will be done that you could use as positive distractions, understanding different levels of care that need to be given for different elements within behavioral health. It can be all the way from, being inpatient for, 30 days to really go through therapy, to visiting something on a daily basis or a weekly basis to get the care you need, all the way down to being able to call during lunch and get some advice, some feedback on a continuing therapy schedule that you've been going through. And those supportive environments really also come to our workers. So like I mentioned, having those moments at home where you could go get a cup of coffee and stare out the window. We've always had that ability to like leave our office and go walk around the block. But having that little bit of more understanding of needing to have that timeout space, and importantly, thinking about our caregivers. So the workforce around healthcare, we all know is struggling. People are leaving healthcare at a rapid pace, more rapid than anyone has ever seen. There's burnout, there's retention issues, there's folks deciding to only work a couple days a week. How is this going to affect the long-term care that's given in our health facilities? How can our health providers really kind of pivot and change the way they look at the spaces that they're giving to their health care workers? I really think that this is a really interesting moment where we can partner with our clients, our health systems, to really think about almost the way that .coms used the spaces back to recruit, when in the .com era, all the amenities. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have a slide in the middle of the staff lounge in a hospital, but there's probably some happy medium there. It's not just having daylight in a staff lounge, which is beautiful and lovely. And every staff that ever has a view during their lunch break will say, this has been amazing. And they normally are buried in the middle of a hospital. But how can we go one step further? Can we create them quiet spaces? Can we create them places they can go and meditate? Understanding the stress of what they go through every day and giving them the time and the area to be able to go and really put themselves back together. So closing the gap, really thinking about where access is happening to healthcare from a public standpoint. Many of us in an urban environment have no problem walking down the street to a Minute Clinic or a drugstore that has, a urgent care in it. But that's not the case everywhere, right? So there's a lot of places in our country that just do not have access like an urban environment. One of the interesting trends that we're starting to see is a lot more adaptive reuse of buildings that are vacant. So you think about the big box stores that are all closing right now, malls that are kind of sitting dormant. Those are huge real estate investments that are sitting there prime for care to be given in someone's backyard. Like it's the place they used to go shop, and now they can go and get their cancer care or their orthopedic care or go to physical therapy. So we're seeing much more of this happening and the development of these spaces, and they already have the parking, they already have infrastructure in place to really support this type of use very quickly. I also think it's going to be interesting, and I think we're already starting to see this as we started to see with a lot of testing and clinic pop-ups that were happening during the pandemic. But we're going to where the people are, whether it be their farmers market or where they gather every week for transportation, where the transportation hubs are, going to university campuses. It's really going to those places and understanding that is going to be the place that is the most convenient for these folks to get the care they need. Jefferson Health in Philadelphia actually just did a 3-year commitment with a pharmaceutical company to really target cardiovascular care in some key zip codes that they saw were not getting any cardiovascular outreach or care, but there was a high level of cardiovascular disease in those zip codes. So working with health systems and understanding where those gaps are and understanding and getting the commitment to create nodes of health or wellness to really help stem some of the imbalance that happens. And then the last piece here is really around healthcare on the go. So telemedicine was already happening before the pandemic, but this really, the pandemic really made it happen fast. Any of those folks or, people in the medical profession that thought, oh, I'm just not sure that I'm going to be able to give the care I want to give to my patients, they didn't have a choice, right? This is what we had to do during the pandemic. And I think what's interesting is that it really did probably take what would have taken us another 5 or 10 years, and we did it all in a year. We don't have to have as specialized of a space to do telemedicine. I would say before the pandemic, we thought we had to design these rooms with special lighting, all the right color paint, like, you couldn't, and now doctors were doing it from their kitchen tables if they needed to. Now, I'm not saying we can do that with every specialty. We can't do that with every, case. But for an initial visit, to first find out if you need to go to a specialist, to find out if you need to go be seen in person, if you need to have an x-ray, it's an unbelievably fast and timely way for us to really get care to folks, and takes down a lot of those barriers. Like, we're all fine getting on a computer now and talking to somebody. So talking to our caregiver and understanding that we can give some initial information, at least to know what the next steps are in our care. So the access of the future, clearly, I think, we're still going to have doctor's offices. You're still going to go and see your doctor in person. There's still going to be a need for them to look at things, or, look at a spot on your skin in the dermatologist's office and make sure that it's, not anything to be worried about. But I think there's going to be a lot more access happening closer to where the people are. So going back to like the transportation hubs, understanding where people are going, being able to stop and get the care you need wherever we need. We saw you could do it in a chair in a parking lot. Now, it might not have been the best patient experience, but we all learned that we needed to do what we needed to do to get by over the last few years. So how can we take the lessons from that, the good things that happen, and then make that a better experience as we move forward? So this was a pop-up testing center, little charrette that we did in our office with taking an old school bus and converting it. And what would you need on that to become a quick COVID lab? But there's nothing to say that this couldn't be a quick pop-up doctor's office. You couldn't take somebody and do some breast screening a couple days a week in a neighborhood that doesn't have access to women's health and care. The idea that we're going to take things a little bit more mobile and make them a little bit more easier to access, I think is going to stay with us. I'd love to have more conversation on this, answer questions.
I wonder, do you think, I mean, the idea of portable clinics and things like that have been, around for a long time because of low income housing or low income people, that's one of the only ways they've been getting it. Do you think that the catalyst of COVID is awareness or more technology or innovation towards the idea of mobile health? Like, is it just that people, are more accepting of it because it becomes maybe a little more mainstream and they're aware that it needs to be done? Or is there any design or technology advancements that have really sort of sprung up at the same time?
I mean, I do think the technology has made people feel more comfortable. I know prior to, the last few years, everyone was super worried about telemedicine and HIPAA and how is my information being kept confidential and how am I sure that this isn't going to get leaked somewhere or my insurance company is going to find out I went and got this test. That privacy level, I think, was always worrisome. I think the more and more that people become more comfortable with my chart and understanding that the digital record of what they have and who they choose to share it with really becomes their proprietary information. I think that has allowed people to feel more comfortable. I think we're still going to have a little bit of that worry of where that information goes. Clearly, if a doctor was sitting at their kitchen table, overhearing somebody's, I'm sure there's still going to be some of that worry of who else is overhearing this conversation that I have this bump and I'm worried what it is.
Right.
So I think it is going to swing back to being a little bit more private. It's going to be done in more private rooms. I don't think it'll be done at everyone's kitchen table anymore. But I do think that the technology people have become more comfortable with. And I think that has allowed people to feel a little bit better about being able to access the care more in their neighborhoods. And I'd say the neighborhoods that probably never had the mobile clinic are much more comfortable with the mobile clinic now.
Yeah.
They never even thought they would need to go to it, but now the convenience of it is awesome. If I can drop the kids off at school and walk 2 blocks and know I can go get this screening rather than get in a car and drive to a medical office building that, the parking isn't always great.
Yeah.
I mean, the convenience factor, I think, will really play into it as well.
Yeah, and I think it also bridges to your adaptive reuse. Like if the people were used to going to the mall until it closed down, they know how to get there, they know where to park, they know, what the the place is like, and they know, it's not inconvenient to get there. I think it's a definitely an interesting opportunity. And then, do you think that adaptive reuse, the buildup of that is more about the client base that is willing to do that, or is it about the design needs of sort of just the renovation reuse of a building? Do you think it's going to be like the capital and the client driving that opportunity?
So we're seeing more of those projects coming into fruition because of developers. So either they're sitting on real estate that they don't know what to do with anymore, right? And they're saying, hey, there's an opportunity in healthcare or multi-use, a health center, along with a gym and a rehab. So I think they're bringing that to the forefront, and they're finding partners. So then they're finding a health system to partner with them. Now, I won't say that there's not some health systems seeking those opportunities out too. I think it happens both ways, but I think the majority of them are actually starting as a real estate, holding that I have no idea what to do with. And now I need to pivot it and make it into something different.
Developer driven. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as they become more aware of the opportunity, I think if you see, even before COVID, the idea that the population is aging and will need more healthcare, you know, it becomes, it's just being compounded now with the idea that everybody needs healthcare, whether you're healthy or not in some aspect,
Right.
and just linking to your idea of behavioral health. And, that's another type of healthcare that was certain not thought about 10 years ago in the same way it is now, even 5 years ago or less.
Right.
It's just really come to the forefront of, it's mental health and awareness. And, you're talking of people getting used to teledocs and things like that. I think it's like a modern day triage, like you get looked at quickly, and it almost becomes anonymous in a way. Like, you don't know who that doctor is, you don't know where they are, it's not like you have to worry about seeing them on the street outside your house. So that level of fear of, they know too much about me, or what is this going on, I think is sort of being dissolved
Right.
with this more and more people becoming aware and, okay with it.
Yeah. And the other interesting stat around the adolescents, the uptick of them getting mental health care is that they felt more comfortable with the actual screen and
Yeah.
talking to this person who's not really in the room with me.
Yeah. It's definitely a
Versus
generational
being
thing.
face to face with somebody that, yeah, it may be a generational difference. It might be you're too much like my parent.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
mean, I think it's
definitely
just it's, adaption, like kids have been using, digital technology, and it's, it wasn't until, like I can recall, growing up, and I was just speaking with someone the other day, like the idea that you were taught typing, or you were taught hand drawing in a way that, but now you become, now your hand drawing is with a pen and, with a stylus on an iPad, and you're drawing that way, or you're, using 3D modeling, and, it becomes much more of you're less hands-on in just the way that we do things now. And that because you learn things quicker and are more adaptive when you're young, I think the younger generation is just going to pick up the ball and,
yeah,
move it forward.
I agree.
So what would you say is the biggest change that you've seen in, the way that either the way that your clients are asking for things, or in the way that design is moving since the change in COVID? Since you have been focused on healthcare for 20 years, there's got to be a significant change in the way that things have been happening.
I'd say from project development, the way we iterate and the way we work on design is interesting in a totally virtual world.
Mhm.
Clearly we've been very creative with different tools to be able to draw in real time and be able to show things. But I will say the one interesting thing that I think we've all talked about in the office is having virtual user meetings when we get like a group of surgeons together to talk about an operating room and the layout. It was incredibly hard to get those people to focus and have time away from, the bedside to come and be in a conference room and to really hash through what the design of the space may be. We've actually found in this virtual world, you get almost a little more participation because
Mm,
they can call in from anywhere and they
right.
don't have to drive, somewhere to be in a conference room together if they were, seeing patients across town. So that piece I think is going to be interesting as we move forward, because we are seeing some more clients like having some hybrid meetings where we're meeting some in time in person and sometime, virtual. And it seems like almost always we're going to be at a hybrid meeting situation where not 100% of everyone's going to be in the room at the same time.
Right.
So how do we continue to iterate and draw and understand and have everyone feel like they're participating and hear everyone's voice? I think is going to be an interesting challenge for us as we move forward, and not unachievable, but I think it's going to be a little bit of trial and error and seeing how the group coalesce together and really trust each other, to hear each other's voices. There's nothing better than personal dynamic and being able to get to know each other. But, when you're sitting here like this all day and you're only seeing each other's eyes, there's a lot of personal connection that doesn't happen either.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this transition happens. I think that's been the biggest change for us is that, you know, we can do everything digitally, and that's typically how we always present everything to our clients, but there's a lot of hand work that goes into what we do. And I think, that won't go away. It's just going to be how we transition that in front of the client. Because we've done a few meetings where we have cameras that zoom down on the table while we're drawing, that it projects it
Oh,
on the screen so that people
okay.
can see what we're doing.
Like an old
Um,
overhead projector.
Sort of,
Yeah,
right? It's the
like a
same
modern, yeah,
concept. But I mean, I think those are it's really going to be around, having more advanced technology to make sure that we can make sure everyone is able to participate.
yeah.
So I think that piece is going to be clear. We're using 3D visualization more and more, whether it be fly-throughs or just bringing up the way the spaces look and feel, even if it sort of is just all white and shapes, and not
Mhm.
so, not the final rendered beautiful space, but so that they can understand, where that cabinet is and where that sink is, and um, how much space they have to the bedside. All of those things, I think, we've been doing. I just think this has made it even more important.
Right. And I think right now, we're at a point where we're still a hybrid understanding of what's going on. We're not fully over it,
Right.
and we're not like we're still hybrid working, but if the client, I think it all, everything before and after is all about what the client really feels comfortable with and wants to do. And then adapting to that in terms of how the project flows. But yeah, to be able to get everyone in a window virtually is much easier, I think. I think one of the interesting things is when you do a hybrid, the people in the room versus the people not in the room, how does that how do you get that interaction the same? Are you losing the people that are not, like, we've had some
Yeah.
meetings where you have to be in the room because we can't, it's like, there's a connection, or I can't hear that person, or I think as we understand, like an either or where is this sort of the fast lane of being able to smoothly move forward with that, I think is an interesting place that we're in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you always have that. It's the same sort of thing when you're in a room together. There's the quiet person in the back who has a lot of opinions but doesn't feel like speaking up. It's the
Hmm.
same on the screen, right? They don't even have their camera on. They're just sitting there and they're maybe asking a question here or there, but you still are afraid that you're not getting some really great input, or an opinion that they have. We've done some different things where we like send out a quick little survey after the meetings to each one of the attendees and ask them all the same questions, or maybe ask them specific questions depending on, if they were a clinician or if they're administration, or what their role is in the project, to try to make sure that we're pulling out, or they feel like they have an avenue to say something even if they didn't feel like saying it in the meeting. And, I think,
Fantastic.
I mean, we kind of, we were doing that a little bit during the world of all being in
Hmm.
person too. So,
Yeah. I mean, do you think you have a lot more access now with different levels of so, like, obviously, in a hospital you have the leadership of the hospital, but then you'll have different levels, like you're saying, operating doctors or doctors or nurses or staff. I mean, it seems like it's a really interesting idea that you're sort of gathering data from them at different levels, and taking that into account what the client overall wants. But do you think that is just amplified now, or were you able to do that before, in the design process?
I think it sort of depended on the client as to how much
Mhm.
access we got. And it sort of still does, but
Right.
I definitely feel like that once I feel like the participation is more consistent
Mhm.
now. So once they realize they can call in and engage for 30 minutes from wherever they are, I think I think we're getting a lot more consistency, whereas somebody might only be able to attend the person in a meeting in person once every 2 or 3 weeks. This
Mhm.
time, them being able to call in and be a little bit more engaged, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely
I think
seems to be
the
helping.
natural ability to, everything that goes around an in-person meeting, in terms of getting there and, the things that happen before and after, like the side meetings and the side discussions, it's sort of cut off in a virtual meeting, but I think, there is a focus that happens in a virtual meeting that is definitely can be a benefit as well.
Yep, agreed.
And I think you were showing some really great examples of pediatric kind of care and dynamism and different ways that you treat the room and light and projecting or in colors and materials. Do you think that is something that you focus on in terms of the the overall, say, the wing or the approach, or is it something that is client dependent, and or is something that you try to strive for in all of to bring to your spaces as you design?
So I've been very fortunate that I've worked on a lot of pediatric projects, whether it be in behavioral health or just regular pediatric healthcare clinics, as well as inpatient units. So I've just, as it has worked out in my career, that I've had a vast experience working in pediatrics. And I think the interesting thing, we always start with the vision and the goal with our client,
Mhm.
and understanding their brand, where they want to go with the facility, what the main drivers are. In the case of a behavioral health project, it's really understanding that those spaces, and in any pediatrics, I think the interesting thing is, you're not just designing for the 3-year-old, you're designing
Mhm.
also for an 18 or maybe even a 21-year-old patient. That
Yeah.
pediatrics runs this huge range, and from any other specialty, you've got to create space that this all these different changes that you go through in life from those age groups, that you
Yeah.
find that, I'm not sitting in a room at 16 that's all Barney, because I don't really relate to Barney anymore.
Yeah.
So I think theming, understanding, what really speaks to and makes a space comfortable,
Mhm.
is different than creating pockets of, and we do that. Sometimes you create clinics that are just for younger age groups, for toddlers, or you create
Mhm.
spaces within a building that is just for that toddler,
Right.
and the families are that are coming with that toddler.
Mhm.
But then you also want to create the little hangout in the zone where I can go plug in and play my games on my phone and not have to be in direct eye contact with my mom, because I want to sit over here and pretend like I'm a cool, a
Right.
cool tween,
Yeah.
so it's really understanding that range. And I don't say that we go into pediatrics with one mindset, but we definitely go
Mhm.
into it with the mindset that we need to be creating spaces for that overarching life experience that you go through,
Right.
in all those different parts of your life. And really, every space is a little different, but I mean, I enjoy color, right? You
Yeah.
enjoy like a
No,
bright
totally.
space, it
Yeah.
makes you happy, a yellow wall
Yeah.
makes you happy. And,
Yeah.
I'm clearly
We've had
no,
we've had many a show about color theory and the way
okay,
colors will make you feel as in a, any age.
right,
It's an intrinsic, the wavelengths, the frequency, the how the color will interact. Yeah, certainly is a universal sort of understanding, I think, which is not as mainstream as, I'm gonna, you know, plaster these walls with clowns and or
right.
Minnie Mouse or
Yep.
my daughter loves Minnie Mouse, so it'd be the first thing you're like, oh, but it could be color or the adaptive use of technology, right? I mean, we
Right.
talk about the children are just like just engaged in it,
Yeah.
through it's not you can't escape it, like the idea of when your kids start using a cell phone or when they transition that they just are, you try not to have them, Zoom, just glued to their screens, right? But, the ability to engage them in a way with technology as they grow older, and understanding that it's not just about the wallpaper when they're younger, it's about the tactileness of the space, or the how it feels, and how it sort of is shaped. Like the image that you showed, it wasn't just a normal ceiling, or the furniture wasn't normal. It was, very organic. So it didn't feel as rigid and
Clinical.
as clinical. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
think it's great.
yeah, those biophilic elements I think really are key to
Yeah.
bringing those in, because we all relate to nature. We all find comfort in sitting in a park and picking up a leaf. And
Hmm.
I think being able to mimic that in our spaces is key.
Yeah. I think it's, I mean, we try to do it in all of our projects, in some way of, really bringing out the biomimicry, biophilia aspect. And it's, it's great when you can collaborate with people who also feel that same way, that there is a inherent benefit to that type of approach and that type of design, and becoming, not just a, a fringe way of doing things, but more of a real benefit that has a value to everyone that sort of engages in the space.
Agreed.
But I did want to ask you, what would be a project that you would really want to work on, sort of a dream project, or different aspects? I know you do a lot of pediatrics, but maybe there's something else in the realm that you really want to get your hands on, and maybe it's one of your adaptive reuse master, a master facility that could help entire town or community. Where do you sort of, what would be a dream project in the next 5 years that you would get your hands on?
Um, so I don't know that I have a project type that I would
Hmm.
like. It would have to be, I have a personal, um, I have a lot of personal experiences in my family with cancer. So I have done some cancer spaces, but I always really enjoy being able to influence and understand the new technologies that are coming out in cancer care and all that. So that might be the only typology that I like always am drawn to.
Hmm.
That I, get it super excited about, to know what's happening. And it's just a personal nature of having many family members that have unfortunately had to deal with a battle with cancer.
Right.
But second, I'd say more almost is like being able to find the client that really is aligned in vision and goals with really creating living, understanding that the building really has a overall socioeconomic impact on the world we live in, and that it provides care, it provides all these other holistic means of creating, a new environment, a new experience for the patients that come into it. But it's really a mindset. And when you work with a client that you really see eye to eye with, and they appreciate and understand, the experiences and vision that you have, and they really also drive and push you to see and experience things in a new way, and really want to push the boundaries of what healthcare buildings and design can do. I think that's really where it is super exciting. And I feel like all of us say that we want to work with a client that's, thinks it like we do. It's not necessarily think like we do. It's pushes us to even think more and better than where we think we are right now. And aligning ourselves with that, I think is the most exciting. I would love to do a very, a great public health project that, was in a community that really needs it. I think we always strive for that. Looking for those opportunities, understanding where things are underserved. So yeah, I think those are the three.
Okay.
Great.
Has there been any discussion or moving on your charrette that you did, with in terms of
Oh, the bus.
the movable clinic kind of thing, or the bus? Yeah.
So I think we've gotten a lot of feedback on it. So it'll be interesting to see. Um, it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that moves forward.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll find some traction with that, and you'll be able to find a place. I think
Yeah.
the Philadelphia example of, trying to bring the academic healthcare, really trying to reach out to the communities, I think is is a good sign for the future, you
Yeah.
know, and, becomes a, like a, a test case or something to prove that, it can be done, and it can be a benefit to not just the community, but to the company that's willing to do it.
Mhm.
They're not just putting their chin out there, they're actually doing something to benefit the community, and it's not something that's gonna hurt their bottom line, like that would make other hospitals and other clinics more willing to do it.
Yep.
Okay, well, great.
Great.
Thank you, Laura. It was great to
Thank
talk
you.
with you. A great presentation, a great topic. I hope that you find your dream project in the future. Find that client that wants to, change the way we look at things. I'd be excited to see that.
Thank you.